guess what? Bidenomics is working.
You just keep telling yourself that, Joe, over and over and over again, and maybe someday it'll come true. I don't think so. No, Bidenomics is one big fat failure. One big failure on so many levels, but you're not going to believe the stampede of leftists out there trying to sell this message. It's working. It's working. Yeah, they wish. Anyway, speaking of leftists, the most leftist, well, one of the most leftist cities of all, which I just happened to be at, unfortunately, the other night, I'm going to fill you in on that, is now trying to ban pizza ovens. Yeah, pizza ovens. Dave Portney had something to say about this.
Save the world today. We have to get rid of coal oven pizzerias in New York City. We got to stop that. The emissions, I guess, is pollution, blah, blah,
blah, right? There's something to be said for that. Listen, New York needs its pizza, and this might actually be something they can rally around. We're going to talk about that. We are also going to talk about Minnesota's insane campaign featuring trans kids, transgenders, a whole sort of tourism effort directed at this. I mean, it's just really getting a little bit weird, just a little bit weird. Plus, Bud Light's CEO has finally surfaced. I will be playing you the sound that we heard from him. And we have a special interview, I've been telling you guys about this, coming up with the CEO of Legacy Precious Metals to talk a little Bidenomics. He doesn't see very good things ahead. It has a lot to do with the Federal Reserve. Anyway, so good to have you all here on the program. Again, we are brought to you, as always, by LegacyPMInvestments.com. If you are interested in investing in gold or in silver, you can do it actually right there online now. You can actually trade, buy and sell gold and silver. They're at LegacyPMInvestments.com, or you can call them. They get a terrific sales team. They'll walk you through the whole thing. 1-866-589-0560. 1-866-589-0560. So we were just talking about Dave Portney, who is, a well-known broadcaster now, had been in sort of sports and did some financial stuff, and has seen his share of scandal, shall we say, as well. But anyway, Dave, he wasn't too happy with the pizza thing, and I'm telling you, he's right. Some of my favorite places, and I lived in New York for many, many years. I even went to school in New York. He listed, we're going to get to those in a second, but I just want to say a warm welcome to all of you. I see so many familiar names and faces again. Not faces. I can't see you yet. We're working on that, right? At some point, we'll be able to do like a giant Zoom session. Anyway, Stephen, good to see you. David again back with us. Craig Miller, good to see you. Mel, everybody. I see such a crowd here, so welcome to the program. Here we go. This is Mr. Portney having a thing or two to say about that pizza.
Figured out how to save the world today. We have to get rid of coal oven pizzerias in New York City. We got to stop that. The emissions, I guess, is pollution, blah, blah, blah. You know what? Pizzerias use coal ovens? All the best. All the
Seriously?
best. John's of Bleecker, Patsy's, Totano's, you fucking name it. Any pizza place, they're like, oh, this is Manhattan. This is old school.
Oh, yeah. Look, I was there the other night, and I was actually at a pizza place with my kids. This whole news came out, and I was thinking, you know what? This is going to be bad for business. It's going to be bad for New York. If there's one thing New Yorkers could unite over, maybe is pizza. Could that bring everyone together? Because I'll tell you, scenes like this certainly aren't. Yeah, so this is what was going down, right? Over the weekend. I've showed you that video before, but I think it's important to see that, to know about that, and then to realize that this city is so messed up that they think that if you just somehow are able to reduce pizza oven emissions by 75%, that's the ticket. That's the answer to everything. I mean, it's so absolutely bizarre. And I say bizarre because, again, going back to me being there just the other evening, I couldn't believe, you know what? We did have an audio problem. So thank you guys for pointing that out. Here I am talking about how I was at a pizzeria the other night and I couldn't believe what I saw because the homelessness, and look, New York has always had an issue with its homelessness, but it was really, really out of control. There were 3 people on the street corner. I was at maybe 69th and Lexington Avenue. So very nice neighborhood, very nice restaurant. The hostess was telling me they had been trying to get all the homeless people out of that area. They had called the police numerous times throughout the evening and nobody came. Of course not, because no police officer wants to do their job because you know what? They're risking their entire life these days if they just do their job. And so consequently, it's just, bedlam there. As we were leaving, so my kids, look, we don't live in the city anymore, thank goodness. They were a little shall I say traumatized, or at least, hey, they realized how good they've got it living out in suburbia. And as we were leaving, there was a homeless person that was throwing up violently right outside the restaurant as we just got into the car. And I'm like, this is awful. And yet all they can talk about are pizza ovens. That's how they're going to fix the city. That plus some meditation and yoga moves from this new mayor, Eric Adams. I'm telling you what they need. They need a Giuliani, and heck, I'd even take Bloomberg because Bloomberg was really serious. And every cop that you talked to said Bloomberg respected cops. So I'd take either one of those guys. You need them back in the saddle. They need back in the seat. Ever since Comrade de Blasio came in, Comrade de Blasio, the whole place just sort of went up in smoke, literally in smoke. That was the other thing. It's like skunks everywhere. You can just, how is it that skunks are in the city, mommy? I wonder. It's just a disaster there. And I feel bad for the city. My heart kind of aches for it because I went to school there. I had my whole life there up until about 5 or 6 years ago. Thank goodness. And I'm like, I very rarely want to ever go back because it is just a disaster. But somehow you'll fix the homeless problem with a few tweaks to the pizza ovens. That ought to do it, right? Oh my goodness. All right. Well, this stuff that was going on in Tompkins Square. We're here. We're queer. We're coming for your children. They were trying to say it was a joke and that they were just trying to get some attention. That was about the most inappropriate joke at the most inappropriate time I've ever heard of. And when they say they're coming for our children and you consider all the weird stuff that has happened, like Target with the rainbow onesies designed by a gentleman. He may not have originally been a gentleman, but by a designer who goes by the name of Eric Cartwell, who is a Satanist, or at least is a Satanist for the purpose of selling Satan-inspired clothing, telling everyone, Satan loves you, therefore you should worship Satan. Yeah, I'm sorry, but you say you're coming for the children, and then these are the designers that are getting hired to design the kids' clothes that are supposed to be the tuck-it swimsuits and the rainbow onesies. I mean, people are a little bit, on edge, shall we say, and a normal group of people, somebody just as a human being would understand that and respect that and maybe has some sensitivity to that and not chant what they were chanting. But the whole world has just gone insane. I mean, look at Minnesota. Have you seen this commercial that the state of Minnesota is releasing to try and get people to vacation there? I mean, are you serious? You want families vacation? This is how you're going to sell your state of Minnesota, which, by the way, no offense to anybody in Minnesota, but is certainly not the top of anybody's list on the vacation destinations, right? Anyway, here it is. You can see there's a whole sort of pride movement. Ooh, can we even show that? By the way, it looked like somebody was a bit topless there in one of the videos, but I guess if they put something on top of themselves, and I'm saying themselves and somebody because you don't know who anybody is these days. And gosh, can't offend anybody. You got it. I was filling out some forms the other day, and the computer absolutely rejected me trying to say her. And by the way, I didn't even want to say that. Let me correct myself. It gave you options. It was her, she, he, him, or they, them. And I'm like, none of the above. Like, my name is Trish. Thank you very much. Like, it's Trish. And I do believe I had to check a box earlier that said I was female. Why do I have to actually tell you? And the idea that they reject it. I mean, this is getting to be too much, and it is not a winning issue. There is a woman who is a very noted feminist, and she's actually so liberal that she's kind of coming around the corner to maybe being considered somewhat right. This is Camille Paglia that I'm talking about, and she's an academic scholar. She's written some very, very newsworthy books on gender and feminism, and she is a professor now in Philadelphia. And there was a lecture that she gave several years ago, maybe around 2015, actually, and she was talking about this phenomenon that we were seeing even back then, and she was really not perplexed by it, because as a historian, she had seen it before. And I think what she has to say about this is so incredibly interesting. And I want you to hear it. It's a little bit long, but it's worth hearing, because this is someone who has devoted her career to all of these gender studies. And what she comes to is a rather alarming conclusion. And again, this is not some kind of right or right of center or uber right person at all. This is someone who is very much on the left. So listen to Camille Paglia here, and we'll discuss.
Proof of it. But now I began all of my studies. My book Sexual Personae began as a dissertation at Yale graduate school on androgyny. I've always been fascinated, attracted, to the subject of androgyny, and that's what sexual personae is. I explored it in history, but the more I explored it, I realized that that historically, the movement toward androgyny occurs in late phases of culture. Okay, as a civilization is starting to unravel. Okay, and that you can find it again and again and again through history in the Greek art. Okay, you can see it happening. All of a sudden, okay, there's a kind of there's the sculptures of handsome nude young men athletes that used to be very robust. Okay, in the archaic period, suddenly began to seem like wet noodles. Okay, toward the end. Okay, and that the people who live in such periods, a late phase of culture, whether it's the Hellenistic era, whether it's the Roman Empire, whether it's the Mauve decade of Oscar Wilde in the 1890s, whether it's Weimar Germany, people who live at such times, okay, feel that they're very sophisticated, they're very cosmopolitan, okay, and homosexuality, heterosexuality, so what, anything goes, and so on, all right, and so, but from the perspective of historical distance, okay, you can see that it's a culture that no longer believes in itself, okay, and then what you invariably get are people who are convinced of the power of heroic masculinity, okay, on the edges, whether they're the Vandals and the Huns, okay, or whether they're the barbarians of ISIS. Okay, you see them,
You see them start to emerge. And for those of you that have heard that clip before, but because I do believe I played it a couple of months ago, I just think it's phenomenal. I was really scouring the internet, trying to find scholars that had looked into this. And I think that she is such an interesting person herself. And to hear that perspective, really saying that is sort of the peak of civilization, the end of civilization. It's a very mature civilization when it gets to the point that it doesn't understand male from female. And you have seen this throughout history. Well, there are still those of us, thank you very much, that do understand, right? And as such, we're a bit offended. I mean, look, I'm live free or die. Cheers, New Hampshire. Live free or die, New Hampshire. Kind of, there's a libertarian bent to me for sure, in that, you know what, you do what you want. Just don't bother me or my children. Thank you very much about it. And so when someone like this character, Dylan Mulvaney, shows up on the scene, it can actually be pretty offensive. One, because Dylan Mulvaney is actually targeting young people with an alcohol campaign, mind you, something that Ted Cruz, senator from Texas, as well as Marsha Blackburn, the senator from Tennessee, were very quick and smart to point out. And they're suing, actually, AB InBev, Anheuser-Busch, as a result of this.
Hi. Impressive carrying skills, right? I got some Bud Lights for us. So, I kept hearing about this thing called March Madness, and I thought we were all just having a hectic month, but it turns out it has something to do with sports. And I'm not sure exactly which sport, but either way.
Well, that little campaign, that one little influencer actually wound up costing that company a whole lot of money, to the tune of nearly $30 billion, and still counting, because the numbers just keep on going down. Like, Bud Light is very swiftly going out of business. And by the way, all the other brands with it. Budweiser here. This Bud's for you. I mean, it may soon be a shell of what it was. I mean, think about how sad that really is. And the mismanagement all along the way, from the marketing executives that somehow thought that this was a cool idea. You know, they would refresh the brand with Dylan Mulvaney. From the acceptance of the award for Marketer of the Year, and really not the proper, if you ask me, humility and humor about it all when they got it. And then you have Brendan Whitworth, who is the CEO of the company. I'm shocked he still has a job. Listen, if I were on the board, well, if I were a shareholder looking to do some shakeups, I'd be pushing that board so hard to be getting rid of him. Nothing against the guy, but this has just been mismanaged from the start. So somehow he thinks that if he goes on CBS, maybe he'll get a little sympathy there. I want you to listen to the anchor who speaks first. This is one of the anchors they've got over on CBS, who almost seems like he's on the payroll for the media company that wants to tell this story of, oh, poor me, poor me. And by the way, look, it is sad what has happened to some of the plants and some of the distributors. I'm not gonna say, that it's not sad. You'll hear what this anchor has to say. But nonetheless, this whole thing seems totally contrived. Watch Brendan Whitworth, CEO of Anheuser-Busch, being interviewed by some guy over on CBS.
This new campaign, this new ad campaign is going to focus on the people behind the beer.
Yep.
They've faced, confrontations just for driving a Bud Light truck. If you're a distributor, you face confrontations for selling the beer.
And
there have been bomb threats. The LAPD had to do a sweep through a brewery in Los Angeles, right? This is all happening. So when you have these conversations with these folks, I mean, I imagine some frank words are exchanged. They're upset. What do you say back? And is there any financial assistance to them?
Well, we announced a couple weeks ago or last week, we are announcing investment for our frontline employees and their employment, as well as financial support for our wholesalers.
Has that started?
That has started.
The money's going out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So he's going to give a little cash handout here and there, which just means if you're a shareholder, you're getting sunk even further. Like, there's no fixing this at this point. I played you the commercial the other day, which was basically making fun of their drinkers, of their consumers. They're all falling all over each other, falling out of the hammock. They're falling off their paddleboard. They're just a bunch of idiots. I guess that's what they think. Anyway, so this is a company. It's lost $27 billion and counting. And I don't think it's going to change. I think that the CEO himself probably went and did that CBS show in an attempt to try and do something to salvage his reputation, something to salvage his company, but it's not salvageable. I mean, this has become such a loaded symbol on both sides, frankly. Bud Light, no more. Wow, Alyssa Heinerstein, you're making Harvard look good. Brendan Whitworth making Harvard look good. I'll tell you what Harvard needs to do. They need to do one big giant old case study on this one and make every HBS student sit down and read it. Here we go. Marketing 101. Do not alienate your core consumer. You know what? You don't need to go to college or to business school or to Harvard, thank you very much, to understand that. Now, do you? You know who else ought to be able to understand a little bit more? That would be the President of the United States and his son, Hunter Biden. Here's the president getting a little bit ornery today because a New York Post reporter dared to ask this question. Watch this and listen and just take a good look at how angry the president gets all of a sudden. Here we go.
President Biden, how involved were you in your son's Chinese shakedown text message? Were you sitting there? Were you involved?
No, I wasn't. And I don't.
Were you?
No.
No, I wasn't involved in this smoking gun message, even if I was seated in the room next door. This is the text that the reporter is referring to. He said, sitting here with my father. This is the son writing to, I should fill you in just a little backstory. You probably already know, but he's writing to the business associate, not associate, because he didn't work necessarily with him, but he was trying to get some money from a guy named Zhang. And Zhang worked with actually a gentleman who is head of China's state intelligence. So that's a little complicated, right? To say the least. Anyway, he said, Hunter did, sitting here with my father, and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. Okay, so he's sitting there with my father, and we would like to understand, he writes. Tell the director that I would like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand, and now means tonight. And Z, if I get a call or text from anyone involved in this other than you, Zhang, or the chairman, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me, that would be the father, that would be the big guy, and every person he knows, and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will not regret following my direction. Oops. It's no wonder Joe Biden doesn't like it when he gets asked a question like this. And by the way, the New York Post reporter did not hold back. This is a little akin to what the left was doing to Donald Trump. Listen to the phrasing of the question here.
President Biden, how involved were you in your son's Chinese shakedown text message? Were you sitting
Shakedown.
there? Were you involved?
No, I wasn't. And I don't.
Were you?
No.
No, I would never do such a thing, right? Wow. I mean, this is one where impeachment, increasingly, you're going to see is going to come into play, and more is going to come out, including what just came out actually over on CBS as well. Let's take a look at this clip, because this is Jim Axelrod interviewing Gary Shapley. Gary Shapley is one of the whistleblowers. A number of whistleblowers have come forward now, and they have said that David Weiss, who was the prosecuting attorney, he was appointed actually under Donald Trump, and Joe Biden chose not to change him out because they thought it might look weird. Yeah, may just look a little weird, right, if they had tossed him. And so they left him in the slot, but he was not allowed, Gary Shapley and the other whistleblower who has remained anonymous, not allowed to actually move forward with charges in California, nor could he move forward in D.C. So that's kind of a big deal, right? Here is
Trish Shapley was a lead IRS supervisory agent in Operation Sportsman, the investigation into Hunter Biden. Shapley said he uncovered conduct that warranted more serious charges.
There were personal expenses that were taken as business expenses. Prostitutes, sex club memberships, hotel rooms for purported drug dealers.
How much did Hunter Biden owe in taxes?
So from 2014 to 2019, it was $2.2 million.
Wow. $2.2 million Shapley is alleging. And you heard the rest of the vocab in there. And that was on like daytime or morning TV, I think. So it ought to be safe here. In other words, the money that he was spending was going to some pretty sort of strange sources, right? Strange places. And yet he was somehow taking a tax deduction for it all. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-boggling. If you know that your father is going to run for president of the United States, might you not have a little bit more humility? But you know what? This family doesn't have any humility. This guy, I almost said kid, and he's not a kid. He's older than me. This guy, Hunter Biden, actually had the bravado to show up at the India state dinner the other night with his dad when this whole thing was unraveling and going down. I mean, just incredible, just incredible. So, of course, at a moment like this, what happens?
Harry Shapley was a lead IRS supervisory agent in Operation Sportsman.
What happens? By the way, Sportsman, don't you appreciate that? It was Operation Sportsman. You gotta appreciate sort of the humor in that one. Sporty guy he was. What happens? They tried to change the topic, which is why you see President Biden now out on the trail, if you want to call it a campaign trail, doing these little speeches. And there's been clearly a whole set of talking points that has been sent out to the minions. We'll get to that as well. But this is what he is telling you.
And guess what? Bidenomics is working.
Yeah, right. I mean, they just keep saying it over and over again and hope that it's true. I mean, forget the fact that we still have about 5% inflation, 5% more than we did this time last year. I don't think that sits well with people. You look at interest rates, they keep moving up. Well, what does that do? It actually reduces the value of people's homes. You look at the fact that we just had a regional banking crisis that was pretty severe. I mean, that was a big deal. And Charles Thorngren, the CEO of Legacy Precious Metals, is going to come up in just a little bit. I have a great interview with him that I want to share with you because he's explaining it all. And he's like, listen, we are not out of the woods. Interest rates are going up. They're going to continue moving it. The Fed is not going to have a choice. It's already said we're going to have to come out and do this 2 more times. They're pausing for now. But if they do that, guess what? All that money that's sitting on bank balance sheets, that's going to be then in jeopardy. You could suffer another banking crisis. So we're not doing so well under this whole Bidenomics thing. And yet, all the little people that are getting the, spoon-fed talking points every day, they're being told to say Bidenomics is working. So here's one over on Fox News trying to sell that story. Good luck.
All right. A study by Northwestern Mutual.
I'll fast forward to where we want to go right here. She starts talking about how she can't afford to buy a house and how tough that is because interest rates are so high. She can't get an apartment. But then she kind of does this really weird turn. Listen.
For us now, so we're going to pay a highly inflated rent because we need to stay in the city for work. It's a problem. Millennials are not able to get on the property ladder, which was a hallmark of what the American dream was. It's an issue. But Joe Biden has a tremendous economic record to run on. There's a nifty chart floating around social media. Everyone should check it out. The U.S. has the highest post-pandemic growth in the G7 and the lowest inflation. So all the countries we compare ourselves to, 13.1 million jobs created. So yes, all the ones that were lost during COVID came back, and then we're gaining.
So don't worry. Don't worry. The U.S., which is always, by the way, the world's largest economy and should always be growing faster than anybody else and should always be enjoying a higher standard of living. Don't worry. We're doing better than all those, poor countries. We're better than Bangladesh. Hey, so what's there to complain about? My gosh. Do you know, Joe Biden said the exact same thing in his speech today. After he said Bidenomics was working, he said literally the same thing, like we're doing better than anyone else. We are the prettiest girl at the dance. So, hey, hip, hip, hooray for that, America. Forget the fact that it's 5% inflation. Forget the fact that your home value is going down. Forget the fact that we have by far one of the worst economies we have had in a generation without many signs of it getting better. But you know what? Now they're trying to tell us over at the White House, don't worry about that stuff. No. You really need to focus on other stuff, other more important stuff. The press, they're just not framing this right. The American people need to think about it differently. I want you to listen to Jared Bernstein. He has all the right credentials. I've known him many years. We used to have a great debate on CNBC. I'd bring him and Steve Moore on often, and it would be lots of fireworks. Robert Reich was even better. You get crazy fireworks. But, basically these folks are effectively socialists. I mean, I don't know how to say it. If I really wanted to dig in, I'd probably just say they were communists. But anyway, they have a very different view of how they think the world should be. And it does not include giving power to the people or the money back to the people, by way of things like tax cuts, which empowers individuals, right, to be able to make their own decisions of what they do with their money. So Jared Bernstein says, you know what? You just need to think about this all differently. Here he is over on wonderful new network, by the way. I go on there quite a bit. News Nation. Listen in.
Joining us now is Jared Bernstein, chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Mr. Bernstein, we know about the $42 billion in this infrastructure bill. President Biden hitting the road to pitch Bidenomics. What does this actually mean, and how do you believe Bidenomics has?
Okay, let me get to the good part.
Out this week is explaining what Bidenomics means, because people have been benefiting from it for years on end now. First of all, it means building the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. That's quite distinct from high-end tax cuts that you hope will trickle down but never do. So it's not top down, it's bottom up, middle out. And it's built on three key pillars. First, building more right here in America by making smart public investments.
Okay, blah, blah, blah. It gets better, I promise.
Right now, and help our entrepreneurs and our small businesses continue to thrive, to build on the record 10 million small business applications.
Approval rating so low. Why aren't Americans?
Okay, so this is good. So the anchor saying, but wait a second, if it's that great, like why does everybody say he's so bad on the economy?
Well, first of all, one of the problems I think we face is that some of these pollsters are not asking the right questions when it comes to specific components of Bidenomics. So I think it's completely legitimate to ask people about approval and these sort of 30,000, 40,000 feet up questions. But at the same time, I also think it's really important, at least if you want to understand the answer to the question you just asked me, to ask people what they think about the largest investment in broadband that we've ever made in this country. This is basically doing what FDR did with rural electrification, doing that for broadband, which of course is so essential. Ask people how they feel about getting rid of non-compete clauses, about making things like hearing aids.
Non-compete clauses. Oh my gosh. Ask people how they feel about getting rid of non-compete clauses. You know, we should ask Tucker.
Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. The Biden administration.
We should ask Tucker, because actually it's going to benefit Tucker. You know who it benefits? It benefits investment bankers, people in the investment community, and it benefits media personalities. That's who's affected by the non-competes, not factory workers. A factory worker, a middle-class worker, doesn't have to deal with the non-compete that Tucker Carlson or Trish Regan or, you know, Wall Street professionals have to. So give me a break. Jared Bernstein, whatever. You know what? You can do better. I know there's, you know, you've got a great education. I would like to see you use it. And let's not try and approach everything from a socialist vantage point, because you know what? It's been tried. You go around the world, you look at communism really is, if you ask me, this is what it's about. I mean, when you've got people marching in the streets, we're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children. They want to tell you it's a joke. I don't think so. This is a very leftist, dangerous, in my estimation, movement. And don't take my word for it. Go back and listen to Camille Paglia again, because Camille, who's on the left, is pointing to the reality that this could actually become the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak. This could actually be a tipping point in society when you lose all sense of self to the point where you don't even understand things like gender. But, you know, look, I try to look at all of this through an economic lens, and I think all of this is motivated by a desire for those on the left to try and take more and more control over us, control over the system. What do you think the pizza thing is about? It's like, you know what? You restaurant owners, you're not in line. We're going to get back at you. Of course, I mean, if you're the fancy schmancy chef out in San Francisco, there was that chef, remember, who was furious and said, well, I'm not going to have my restaurant here in San Francisco if I can't have my gas stoves. And so sure enough, San Francisco's like, oh, well, we'll make an exception for you. You see how that works? That's how it always works, which is why it doesn't work fundamentally. So we got to start asking some real questions about who's in charge. It should be us, right? The power to the people. We want a limited government. We want the ability to have the freedom that we need to prosper and to grow. and to have the thriving economy for generations to come. I mean, this is a big issue as we go into 2024, a very, very big issue. And Joe Biden just wants to keep taxing you, and he's going to tell you, no, Bidenomics is working because I got rid of the non-compete clauses and I put some broadband in. Not in my neighborhood. I'm still waiting for it. If this internet connection goes out, guys, we'll know why, right? Anyway, I sat down recently with Charles Thorngren, my very good friend, and the sponsor, by the way, of this program, and one of the sponsors. He's just been a terrific advocate for the show. And so we really like them over at Legacy. PMinvestments.com. 1-866-589-0560 is their number. Anyway, listen to what Charles had to say. Like I said, I taped this a couple days ago, so you'll see a change of clothing if you're watching there on video. By the way, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, that's wonderful. We're thrilled you're listening on Apple Podcasts. If you're watching right now, on video here live on the YouTube channel. If you're watching on Facebook, do me the favor of making sure that you subscribe to these platforms. Hit that subscribe button right now. Do me that favor. Like the video. We're going to have it all clipped up so you can share it and you can watch it in little bits and parts throughout the day and throughout tomorrow. Anyway, it goes a long way to helping the algorithms. And thanks to you guys, I'm going to knock my mic over here. Thanks to you guys, we have been growing. I mean, it's been enormous. We've grown some 20,000 subscribers on Facebook just in the last month. We've grown tremendously here. You guys usually are keeping an eye on it. What are we at right now? Let me take a look. Let's see here. Great to see so many of you watching live. I see... Again, some new faces, some new names, as well as some ones that I'm very familiar with already. Mac, good to have you here. Vic, Jimmy, we're somewhere around, 78,000 right now, near 78,000 here on YouTube. So trying to get to 80,000, wouldn't that be great? Anyway, do me that favor. If you haven't subscribed, do subscribe, and I appreciate it. The other thing that you need to do, and I'll put the show handle in the show notes, but go over to trishreganshow.com when you can and sign up for the newsletter because it's free and then you'll know when I'm live and all that good kind of stuff. I see we have some people even joining from Venezuela. Oh, wonderful. It's good to see you. Very good to see you. Douglas Nunez joining from Venezuela. En un día yo quisiera hacer un programa en español. I probably mutilated that, but one of these days, I'm going to work on my Spanish and I was quite fluent at one time. I'm still fairly fluent, but you can probably hear my accent. Anyway, one of these days, we're going to actually do this in Spanish too. But without further ado, I do want to bring you Charles Thorngren here, and let's discuss this because he makes some really valid, really important points. And if you care about your money, you're going to want to understand what he's laying out. It took me a while. I'm like, wait a second. I'm trying to follow your logic here, Charles. But what he says, and by the way, he's been right. He's been spot on throughout this. In fact, so far back as like November of last year, he was saying that he anticipated we would be looking at a banking crisis here in the U.S. And what did we have? This spring, sure enough, a banking crisis. Anyway, without further ado, Legacy Precious Metals CEO Charles Thorngren. Charles Thorngren, so good to see you. Sponsor of this program from the very beginning, Legacy Precious Metals. Charles is the CEO of the company. Good to have you back. Lots to talk about.
Great to be back. Indeed, there is lots to talk about.
I mean, the Federal Reserve, okay, we're going to start there because they're telling us, okay, we're going to pause on hikes, but there's more coming. I'm looking at it and, part of me, as you know, says, well, of course, there's got to be more coming because you guys really screwed things up with all your printing and all your low rates for too long. So yes, of course, there has to be more coming. But then the realist in me says, we're going into a very political time, a political year, 2024. Are they really going to want to hike rates at a time like that, Charles?
It's a dilemma, right? And it shouldn't be. If the Fed's doing its actual job, there's no dilemma whatsoever. But the Fed hasn't been doing its actual job for quite a while. So it makes the rest of us look at it and say, what will they do? Will they do what's best? Will they follow the guidelines of helping someone over another person? So hard to say nowadays.
Yeah, and I guess, and perhaps I'm getting too cynical, but I look at his buddy, Janet Yellen, being over there at Treasury, I could never figure out quite why Jerome Powell and company at the Fed were so willing to print when Biden was giving out the third stimulus check and you had Congress spending more and more and more with the Inflation Reduction Act, that's the best name ever, right? I was like, why are they doing this? They've got all the stimulus already. They don't need to do this, but they did it anyway. So we always say they're day late, dollar short. I mean, this seems to be another example of that, just doing the inverse of what's needed, because I don't know, but I'm looking at the economy and I don't think it's as strong as it once was. If you start raising rates, you're going to have more economic pain.
Well, absolutely. And this is what we've talked about. There is no way other than recession out of this. There's no way. This is what has to happen. They will still have to fight inflation, right? Mm-hmm. And choosing this month to skip, pause, whatever word he wants to use today, the rate hike makes no sense. So, someone like me, I start digging in. I'm like, why? Well, why this month? What's so special about this month? And that's really where, unfortunately, we think, okay, what is going on with the Fed? Why do I have to doubt an obvious decision that should have been taken? If we're fighting inflation, it's beginning to show some weakness. You raise again. You make sure you crush it. Because if you don't, it comes back with a veracity that is much harder to fight.
But they're afraid.
So it brings questions.
They're afraid. And I think that fear has kind of trapped them and consequently trapped all of us, right? The U.S. economy.
Well, we have a scenario, and I think that position has always been a little influenced by the big markets, right? Their job isn't to worry about the stock market, but when people are losing money, they want answers. So they've always felt some pressure there. And I know it's weird to say this. We're looking at a market that's doing very well as far as markets go in the short term. But in Wall Street, there's no doubt what's to come. You're seeing reports out there now, expect the next big decline. And that's coming at a point where you have the Fed acting in a way that's not helping. The Fed should never be worried about what my stock portfolio is.
Oh,
that's not their business. But we see more and more pressure. And the reality is, for an incumbent president to get reelected, people have to feel like they're doing better than when he started.
Sure. I mean, I think that was, Bush's problem. Look, you've got to have a good economy. It actually, and it can work both ways. It's funny because in some respects, I think that the success of the economy as we went into the election in 2020 enabled people to kind of feel like, all right, well, things are fine. Like, I'm not really going to vote on policy. Let me vote on personality. And yet when the chips are down, right, and the economy starts stumbling, what did you see? Well, in midterms, people came out and they voted for a lot of conservatives because they were saying, wait a second, I don't think this economic policy, and by the way, some of the social policy as well for a lot of people is really working for me. And so they voted against those Democrats there. And so it's a question of, what happens. And I think basically whatever happens, right, it's going to have a huge impact on our country, on our policy, on our economy going forward, which is why you have to take this stuff really seriously. I was just talking to a tax expert about the implications of changes to come in 2025 when the tax cuts that Trump had put through are no longer there and all the changes they might make. And so it's really important, and you talk about this a lot, Charles, for the onus to be on the individual to really take charge. A big part of that, at least is your concern, of course, is to have some safety in your portfolio. And I know you look at gold and silver. We always leave silver out, but silver is a great one to talk about. You look at these precious metals as helping people to diversify and get some of that safety in their portfolio. Why is that? Back to basics here.
The basics of it, it's like we said, that personal protection, right? And we can talk econ in a big sense, or we can talk econ in a small sense. But the reality is, we know the facts of life are this. As you get older, things get more expensive. That's just the way that it works. And gold and silver are there in the common sense aspect because they're going to.
By the way, it's not just us, right? Like, I feel like I remember back in the day when they really had penny candy stores.
Absolutely.
And now everything's like $1.50 or $5 for a pack of Swedish fish, those little candies. You're right,
Yeah.
but we say that, but it's inflation that's at the heart of it all, right?
It's inflation. And for me, I naturally build inflation. So that means we should always have some gold and silver, right? Regardless of how great the other markets are doing, it's there to fit that asset need. And then you take a time like now where the economy is questioned. And if you ask a simple economic question to 10 different people, you're going to get 12 different answers.
Right.
So what does somebody do? What do you know? How do you know what's right? So that's what we want to do. We want to take the basic numbers and do the math, but then add the common sense behind it. Because how you feel about the economy is also important. How you feel about what's happening with your investments is also important.
Sure.
We know, right? We're going to talk, and the president's going to talk 3.7% unemployment. It's fantastic. We're doing great. But the Fed's telling you it's going to be 4.3% next year.
Yeah.
That's just what it's going to be.
Again, we're talking, by the way, if people are just joining us right now, we're talking with Charles Thorngren. He's the CEO of one of our great show sponsors here at the Trish Regan Show, Legacy Precious Metals, legacypminvestments.com. I put the handle right up there on the screen so people can see it, and they can reach your team at 1-866-589-0560. Again, that's 1-866-589-0560. Look, it's just, it's a reality of life, I think. I mean, I can't really remember when prices went down. And by the way, if they did, Charles, if prices went down, we'd have a whole other set of problems going on too, because then you'd be trying to fight deflation, which is much
worse.
It makes me think that gold would, I don't know what gold would do in that environment. I almost think it would keep going up because it's like, oh my gosh, it's so scary. Now we're trying to deal with something like that.
Right.
But we've just got a messed up environment. I sometimes say, hey, Charles, like, what if we just got rid of the Fed? I mean, people have talked about that before. I know it's probably not that realistic, but it feels like they're in there tinkering all the time. We need them for some stuff, but they just always overdo it. Is there another solution? Is it, is AI the future of the Federal Reserve?
Oof. That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
The Fed, do we need them? Listen, the Fed has an actual job, right? The effectiveness of how they do it, that's another question altogether. But the Fed of itself and in itself has a job only if we still value our economy the way we say we do. If we still value the way we manage our debt, if we value our nation and our principles and say we want to live within our means and we need the government to do the same thing, then the Fed's job is vital. But today, we don't do that. Today, we have them saying,
we don't value it.
Right. So you could, in these aspects, if we're willing to live here in a country and in an environment where we say we don't care whether our country pays its debts or not, we don't care if we're responsible with our money, then we don't need the Fed. Go ahead and get rid of them. But if we ever want to be that country again, we need the Fed, but we also need an effective Fed. That's the difference. The talk about having the Fed isn't the real question. The talk about having a Fed that can do its job, that's the real question. When will we get that again?
Let me ask you, because the whole, Bitcoin craze took the country by storm for a while. That's come crashing back down to earth. And I think in that process, people have gone back to basics. And, I'm not here to bash Bitcoin. I know that, you find a lot of things about it incredibly interesting as well. But it's just interesting to me as we watch gold now still hovering around this $2,000 an ounce. It seems as though people are saying, okay, I want something a little bit more tangible. Is that a fair characterization?
That's a very fair characterization. I think that is probably the biggest thing people are saying. I need something more tangible. If you consider the dollar and really look at it, most of us don't carry them around anymore. So the way we spend now is not a lot different from a theoretical Bitcoin economy, right?
Yeah.
We have a value that we look on our screen and say, oh, I have this much money I can spend. So whether that's valued in Bitcoin or dollars, it's kind of irrelevant, right?
Right.
And as Bitcoin gets more useful and more places allow you to pay in cryptocurrencies, you almost don't need it to some degree. But the difference is, and here's the important part about a Bitcoin or an Ethereum or any of the other millions of them that have come out, is they're not beholden to anybody, right? Our dollar is beholden to us, the people. Now, people often will say, I like the idea that it's not beholden. No, it's important that it's beholden to us as a nation, us as a people. For us, and we've talked about it before, if we exclude the radicals of both the left and the right, 90% of America is right there in the middle. And it's important that us 90% still have the ability to control that economy, still have the ability to control that spending. If we live in a Bitcoin world where it's not beholden to anybody, anything goes. And that's a problem. Is it so much of a problem for personal finance? Maybe not. But
Well,
for your
how does that
government,
differ with gold? I mean, isn't this, people would say the same thing, like gold's not beholden to anyone. I mean, other than it's priced in dollars.
right. It's not beholden to anybody, but it's also tangible. It can't just be created.
Hmm.
Right. And here's another bigger aspect. Now, someone can steal your gold. If you leave it out, they can take it. Right. But people can steal your Bitcoin, and it happens all the time. And you've never seen them before. Most of the time, they're not even within this nation. That's still an issue for cryptocurrencies.
I think
Hacks
so.
are an important thing.
I think so. Again, we're talking with Charles Thorngren. He is the CEO of Legacy Precious Metals. Legacy Precious Metals is a company that sells gold. They'll buy it too. In fact, you can go to their website, legacypminvestments.com, or call them 1-866-589-0560. I know how wonderful your sales team is. I've spoken with some of them over there. Just a really, really great group, and can help anyone sort of navigate this complicated space, right? Like, it's a little bit complicated. But if you're somebody who doesn't want to deal with the phone, they can also just go straight to the website, because you guys actually have a platform in which one can open an account and buy and sell gold and silver, which is just really cool. And for all the kids out there, right, that like actually like to be online as opposed to talking to a salesperson, I think and I'm joking with the kids, but it's kind of, it reminded me almost of a trading platform in some respects, right? Because you can have an account, you can buy the gold, you can sell it back to you guys, and you have a lot of different products there and a lot of different sort of variations, whether you want coins, whether you want bars, whether you want it in a vault. I think that's neat. That's like my favorite part, that you can have it in a different vault, and that which is it in Switzerland, is it in Texas, is it Utah? Is the other option?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So why do people choose those different things? Like, I mean, I get why some people actually want it in their presence, but a lot of people will choose the vault, or they'll choose a bank deposit box. Any sense of why people go in different directions?
There's a few different reasons. One of the big one is it depends on where you live. What kind of space do you have?
Mm-hmm.
My people who buy silver, you start buying silver, you're accumulating quite a few ounces of physical metals. Where do you put it? Right. Years ago, it's not that way anymore. If you know where I live, don't come by and ask. I used to have an old bowling ball carrier, and I just put silver in there instead of a bowling ball. Easy to store it. It's out of the way. But as you accumulate, you deal with that scenario. Do I have the space to put it? Where do I put it? Do I feel secure with it there? That's another question.
Security is important. A lot of people, you don't necessarily want this stuff in your house because it makes you more vulnerable. And so they look to, a bank, a deposit box at banks, or of course, a vault. Plus it's just kind of cool to say, I got my own vault. Let me check on my vault. I'm going to go to legacypminvestments.com and see how my vault is doing today. You price it in real time, don't you?
We do.
Okay.
We do. You have to. We've often said that the platform gave us the ability to use the phone in multiple ways, because everyone now uses cell phones. For those in my generation, we use it to call people. For the younger generation, they just use it to text, and they can open up their app and they can check their metals online on their phone. So
it's really, 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 really neat stuff. So legacypminvestments.com. Again, I'm just putting up the website so everybody can see it. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure you come over and you check out this interview. You can see Charles right here on the YouTube channel as well as Rumble. We're on Facebook too. 1-866-589-0560. Listen, Charles, these are crazy times. They're going to keep getting crazier. I feel somewhat pessimistic, sadly, about the long-term future. I think there's a lot of opportunity, along the way for people in different spaces, and that's what they kind of need to look at. But most importantly, it's also about keeping yourself and your family safe for the future. And I know something that's so critical and important to you. So I think they should give you guys a ring or go check out the site.
I agree. And you know what? Pessimism is a good thing. It gives you the ability
as long as we can
to
keep smiling, right? Hey, thanks.
Exactly.
Charles Thorngren, good to see you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
There we go. I'm back with you. Again, we were just listening to Charles Thorngren, an interview that I had taped with him. I was talking with you, so many of you throughout that, and Jimmy Cool was saying that he wants to just bury his money in his backyard. And I'm just cautioning him to remember what treasuries are paying right now, or even just, the local savings, your money markets even are upwards of 4%. So this is the inflation-ridden economy that we're dealing with. So I think we all have to get a little bit more creative. As much as we'd love to just put our money under the mattress, you have to just think about, how do I preserve its value, and how do I fight inflation in the future, and how do I fight it when the cards are so stacked against me? If you're watching this, and that's how it feels, right? Like, because the system seems extraordinarily rigged, and rigged in such a way where, you've got whistleblower after whistleblower coming out and telling us that Joe Biden's son was getting special treatment because of who his daddy was. I mean, this is something that the mainstream media can't even ignore, although many of them are trying. I mean, I went through the Wall Street Journal today. You don't see anything on this. And I'm like, wait a second. This should be your story, guys. You're a financial newspaper. This is a financial story. If nothing else, it's a story about tax evasion and how somebody just kind of got off. I mean, you heard what Gary Shapley was saying. We've seen over and over again that this is not just a slap on the wrist if you're trying to evade taxes in such a deliberate way. Anyway, Karine Jean-Pierre, that, brilliant woman over at the White House that's up there at the podium trying to answer questions there with the media, she really didn't have much to add because they just wouldn't let it go. They are now like dogs with a bone. Listen to the media, not able to ignore the elephant in the room, which is this news of the plea deal that Hunter Biden got. Watch.
Can I follow up on that?
No, I just called in somebody. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Kirby wouldn't answer James's question, though. Are you going to answer the question? I mean, not a reasonable question to ask, whether the President of the United States was involved, as this message seems to suggest, in some sort of a coercive conversation for business dealings by his son. Is that something, if he wasn't, then maybe you should tell us.
So here's the thing, and I appreciate the question. I believe my colleague at the White House Counsel has answered this question already, has dealt with this, has made it very clear. I just don't have anything to share outside of what my colleagues have shared, and so I would refer you to him and the DOJ. Just not going to comment from here.
Text message.
I will.
The problem is, she's saying, I'm going to refer you to my colleague, but as they then went back at her, like, the colleague had nothing to say on this. And no, the colleague had not said anything. I don't think they know what to say. And what do you say when these people have the brazenness to then trot out Hunter Biden at the state dinner for India? I mean, really, it's amazing to me. It's amazing that this guy is the president of the United States. But maybe not for long. I mean, maybe this will actually sink him. I don't know. Attorney General Merrick Garland saying that, no, David Weiss, the prosecutor, he had the ability to do whatever he needed to do. Watch.
Do you think, just to follow on that, do you think that a special counsel, can you explain the rationale for not appointing a special counsel in this case?
Mr. Weiss had, in fact, more authority than a special counsel would have. He had and has complete authority, as I said, to bring a case anywhere he wants in his discretion.
Okay, just to be very clear, that is not at all what the whistleblowers told us. 2 whistleblowers, a reported number, as many as 6 whistleblowers, have allegedly come forward and told the House committee doing this whole investigation that no, actually, David Weiss didn't have the authority. He was shut down. And David Weiss himself was surprised. And all the IRS agents that were investigating this, they were all surprised. So what kind of corrupt America do we live in if certain people can get away with certain things? What kind of corrupt America do we live in if, in fact, as it has been alleged, there was a pay-to-play type of scenario going on? In other words, Hunter Biden didn't get that $83,000 a month Burisma board job all on his own. He got that, one would think, because he had a certain name. Now, just to back up, I'm not saying that, if you're the son of a president or son or daughter of a politician, you don't deserve your own shot in life. That's not fair either, right? Because you ought to be able to pursue your own career. And sure, maybe being a Biden helps you, or Clinton helps you. I mean, it's natural, right? But there's a distinction between having your own career, being qualified for certain jobs, and then getting the $83,000 a year Burisma job, which, by the way, you're then trying to hide the income somehow through. If you look at the scheme, and I walked you through this all on Tuesday, it's pretty unbelievable. And it seems intricate, but when you actually talk to accountants, it's not. It's like sort of, textbook what you would look for. In fact, the whistleblower sort of said this, like it was so obvious because they had the money, or he had the money, and then he was doing some loan back to his company, Rosemont Seneca. It was all designed to try and evade taxes. And I'm like, why are you evading taxes? Why would you try and save $2 million, as Gary Shapley alleges in that interview on CBS with Jim Axelrod? Why would you do that when your president or your father is about to run for president? Well, I mean, clearly the guy was a reckless guy. Between the women and the drugs and the buying the gun and not having the permit. And I mean, this is one reckless dude. So I would suspect there's more there. And I feel very sorry for Joe Biden. It's sad, he's got a lemon for a son. And apparently, it's unfortunate that the son that passed away was sort of, the be all end all. And Hunter just kind of never found his way, shall we say. But I get it. It's his son. And I think we as human beings can afford him some sympathy on all of that and some empathy, most definitely. But as a country, we deserve more. And we need to make sure that there was no funny business. I think that that's well within our right. They certainly would be doing it if the tables were turned. Now, would they not? Not that 2 wrongs make a right. You hear me. And what do I talk about? Allegations. I'm not coming out and telling you the whole thing is absolutely positively true. I mean, I may think deep down maybe it is, but we've got to be careful. We've got to be judicious. I am a journalist. And unlike those people over at MSNBC and CNN and former members of our State Department and former members of the CIA that came out and said, for sure, Trump was an agent of the Russians. They didn't say alleged. They went full in on that entire narrative. It was unbelievably irresponsible. So while I may think certain things, I'm cautious about how it's framed because I feel that it is our duty as Americans to make sure that you are innocent until proven guilty. But this is why I do think that there is a very good shot that impeachment could be in the works. And by the way, some Democrats actually want that. You know why they want that? Because it means, you're going to get Gavin Newsom running against possibly Donald Trump, and they feel like Gavin Newsom would be able to beat Donald Trump. Be interesting. Wasn't Kimberly Guilfoyle She was married to him. And I worked with her at Fox and know her well. And, look, that's his ex-wife. So I bet if somebody wanted to do some due diligence, they could get some interesting scoop there. Anyway, Gavin Newsom we don't even need to go there. The problem with Gavin Newsom is that he absolutely has been a train wreck for all of California. And I know we had one of our viewers watching us here from San Diego, originally from Venezuela, and he loves San Diego now. And look, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. I get it, but the taxes are insane. And we know that crime issues, et cetera, throughout California have really gotten worse. And consequently, you have a population that is leaving California. Businesses don't want to go and start in California anymore. I mean, hey, great weather, beautiful topography, really great hiking. Highway 1, I love it. I mean, a great, great place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live. You wouldn't want to live because it's just become too onerous and too much of a burden. They've actually floated the idea that you can't leave California, that if you're in California and you leave, that somehow California can follow you on taxes. I mean, I'm sorry, but last I checked, we are still the United States of America. You are free to move from one state to another unless California wants to declare itself its own country, which, by the way, go for it, California, if that's what you want to do. I would not ever stand in your way. Hey, listen, it's great to have you guys here tonight. I keep drinking from my Live Free or Die cup, which is actually one of the products that we sell on the Trish Regan store. So forgive me as I gulp this down. This is the problem with not having real commercial breaks. This is the problem, I guess, with a live show. Anyway, this is on the trishregan.shop, trishregan.shop. It's a brand new store site that we have. And I love seeing you all. I love our get-togethers. One of these days, we're going to make it like a permanent time. Anyway, wonderful, as I said, to have you all. I'm interested. We have an angry Canadian in the discussion group this evening who has been throwing some wildfire into the conversation, no pun intended. Anyway, I appreciate the debate. I love debate. And you know what? We ought to be able to have good debate, right? I mean, that's probably the thing that's most missing from our society right now. The idea that people don't even want to hear other ideas. And we don't want you to be angry there in Connecticut. And we don't agree, Canada, we don't agree with your sentiment. I think most of us here are sort of red-blooded, meat-eating capitalists and proud of it, right? Proud of it because that is what has gotten us to where we are. Leslie saying earlier in the conversation that capitalism represents freedom. And while it may not be perfect, and I'll give you that, and we can have another discussion one day on the flaws with capitalism, but it is the best system we have. And there's nothing that beats it. It recognizes our flaws as human beings, but it helps mold those flaws in a way that generates a positive outcome for the greater society. So sure, it's not perfect. And you've heard me many times go on about how we've become this hourglass economy and you get a lot on top and a lot on bottom, everybody in the middle squeezed. And it's in part because the workers don't have as much leverage. That's actually perhaps because of COVID started to change in this different kind of economy. But yet now we're regressing again. And it's because of the inflation. It's because of Bidenomics. So we're not out of the woods yet. I look forward to talking with you again, everyone, tomorrow. Great to have you here, as always, and see you soon. Don't forget, by the way, go to the website, trishreganshow.com. Go to the website and sign up for my newsletter so that we stay in constant contact. It's important. I'll see you tomorrow.